The 911 call hit at 7:02 p.m. A high-cracking voice slammed into the dispatcher's headset. "You have to send someone." The police officer's dog gets loose. It's attacking Mr. Henderson. Then the dispatcher heard it in the background. Not barking, just a brutal concussive fury tearing through the line. That sound did not belong on Sycamore Street in Corktown's quiet, historic Detroit neighborhood. To the neighbors, this was the moment they'd all feared the 190-pound blue-black German Shepherd finally unleashed. They'd watched his handler, Officer Elias Thorne, a worn white American cop, bring home that blacked-out SWAT truck like a tank on their block. They didn't see a partner. They saw a weapon on 4 legs, a killer straining at a leash, a monster living among them. What they didn't see, what they couldn't know, was that the monster was the only thing standing between them and disaster. What if the beast they feared was actually a guardian? What if that terrifying aggression was a warning no one understood? Stay with us. The story of K9 Vandal isn't about the weapon they feared, but the hero they never knew, and the secret he tried to shout with teeth and fury before it was too late. His registered name was Vandal DPD K9 Unit. He was not a pet. He was a city asset, a tool of specialized law enforcement valued at over $50,000. But in truth, he was priceless. He was a 190-pound German Shepherd of a Czech working line, a size that was almost unheard of even for his breed. His coat was the color of a midnight storm cloud, a blue-black sheen that made him look less like a dog and more like a panther. He was, in a word, magnificent. And to the civilians who lived near him, he was terrifying. His handler was Officer Elias Thorne. Thorne was a quiet man, a 10-year veteran of the Detroit PD recently assigned to the coveted SWAT K9 position. He was a single father to an 8-year-old girl named Lily, trying to raise her in this revitalizing neighborhood. Corktown was a mix of old-world brick row houses and new sleek condominiums. It was a community built on a fragile, emerging peace, and Vandal was a daily reminder of the violence that lay just beyond its borders. The dog was the living embodiment of the tension between the city's rough edges and its aspirations for quiet suburban life. The problem began almost immediately. It wasn't just Vandal's size. It was his presence. When Thorne pulled up in the matte black armored K9 cruiser, the neighbors would pull their own children a little closer. They would cross the street. They heard the bark when Thorne opened the door, a deep thoracic thump that rattled windows. It wasn't the hello of a family golden retriever. It was a declaration of authority. It was a sound that said, "This is my territory, and I am in command." The unofficial leader of the opposition was Mr. Henderson, the president of the newly formed Homeowners Association. Henderson, retired from a career in chemical engineering, had moved to Corktown for its historic charm. He was a man of meticulous lawns, precise rules, and zero tolerance for deviation. To him, Vandal wasn't a police dog. He was a liability, a proximity to violence that threatened property values, and he argued children's lives. The emails began circulating, concerns about the animal on Sycamore Street. The proof of Vandal's instability came on training days. A police K9, especially a SWAT-level dog, cannot simply be off-duty. His skills must be honed daily. Thorne's backyard became a training ground. Neighbors peering through their blinds would film it on their phones. They saw Thorne in a massive padded bite suit. They saw Vandal on command transform from a silent shadow into a fur-covered missile. They saw him launch airborne and slam into Thorne, locking his jaws onto the padded arm with a primal ferocity. They didn't see a controlled training exercise. They saw a rehearsal for a mauling. The videos shared on the neighborhood's private social media page were damning. "This is what he's teaching it to do," Henderson wrote. "Imagine if it mistakes one of our children for that suit." Elias Thorne was trapped. He tried to be a good neighbor. He hosted a barbecue. He tried to explain. "He's a working dog," Thorne told them, Vandal sitting calmly at his side. "He has a job, but he has an off switch. He knows the difference." To prove it, he'd have Lily, his daughter, come over and gently toss a ball for Vandal. The dog, who hours before was practicing high-risk takedowns, would softly take the toy. His massive head lowered, letting the little girl braid a piece of bright pink yarn into the fur on his ear. The neighbors smiled, but they didn't believe it. They saw a predator pretending to be tame a wolf in dog's clothing. The gentleness to them was somehow more menacing than the aggression. From Vandal's perspective, the world was simple. It was a catalog of smells, sounds, and directives. His entire universe revolved around a single non-negotiable mission: protect Elias. The neighborhood was just a place of confusing, irrelevant stimuli. The other dogs, the mailman, the children, they were background noise. He was in a constant, low-level state of readiness, waiting for the one sound that mattered. Thorne's hand on the Kevlar vest, the click of the heavy-duty collar. That was the sound that meant it was time to go to work. But then a new specific stimulus entered his world. Mr. Henderson, in his retirement, had become a hobbyist. He was a tinkerer. His detached garage, which shared a chain-link fence line with Thorne's backyard, was his sanctuary. He spent his afternoons in there, restoring old engines, mixing custom solvents to clean antique parts, reliving his days as a chemical engineer. He was by all accounts harmless. It started faintly, a smell that drifted over the fence on warm afternoons. It was acrid, sharp, with an almost sickly sweet undertone. To Thorne, it smelled like a workshop. To Vandal, it smelled like hell. The first time he scented it, Vandal shot up from his resting place on the porch. The fur on his massive shoulders, his hackles stood erect. A low growl like distant thunder rumbled in his chest. He fixated on Henderson's garage, his blue-black body rigid, his eyes locked, pupils dilated. The escalation happened on a Tuesday. Henderson was in his garage, the main door open, working on a vintage motorcycle. The smell of the solvent he was using to clean the engine block was thick in the air. Vandal was in the backyard. Thorne was inside making lunch for Lily. Suddenly, Vandal changed. This wasn't the controlled, focused drive of training. This was panic. This was rage. He launched himself at the chain-link fence separating the 2 yards. He didn't bark. He slammed. 190 pounds of muscle and instinct hit the fence with the force of a car crash. The metal bowed. The post groaned. He reared back and hit it again, snarling a deep, guttural roar of pure, unadulterated fury. Mr. Henderson saw it. He dropped a heavy wrench which clanged on the concrete. He saw the dog foam flying from its muzzle, eyes rolled back, trying to tear its way through the metal fence to get to him. Henderson scrambled backward, fell over a toolbox, and crab walked into his house, slamming the door. He immediately called 911. "He's trying to kill me. The dog is rabid. It's trying to kill me." That incident sealed Vandal's fate in the neighborhood's eyes. The HOA convened an emergency meeting. The petition was formal, citing city ordinances about dangerous animals and public nuisance. "This animal is clearly unstable," Henderson argued, his voice shaking but righteous. "It has a documented history of aggression. It fixated on me and attempted to break through a barrier to attack. Officer Thorne must be held accountable. He must choose his job or this community. That weapon cannot live here." Thorne was cornered. He was summoned by his own captain. "Elias, I'm getting calls from the city council." His captain said, his face grim. "This HOA thing is a PR nightmare. They're threatening to sue the department. You're a good cop, and Vandal is a phenomenal K9. But I need you to sort this out. Fix it. Or the brass is going to fix it for us." Fixing it meant Vandal would be removed, kennelled at the precinct, or worse, retired. Thorne was furious. He was protecting these people, risking his life alongside this dog, and they were trying to tear his partner away from him. He couldn't understand it. He apologized to Henderson, reinforcing the fence with steel bars. He assumed Vandal was just being overly territorial. He never once made the connection to the smell. To understand Vandal, you had to understand where he came from. He was not a rescue. He was purpose-bred, imported from a renowned kennel in the Czech Republic, his lineage a documented history of warrior-class service dogs. He was selected at 8 weeks old for his drive, his nerve, and his stability. His training began almost immediately. He was not taught to be a pet. He was taught to be a soldier. His education at the Detroit K9 Academy was grueling. It was designed to find the breaking point of every dog and then build them back up stronger. Vandal had no breaking point. He excelled in every discipline. Tracking narcotics detection, article search. But his specialty, his art, was tactical apprehension. He was trained for SWAT operations. To go into buildings off-leash in the dark, to find the threat and neutralize it. He was the top of his class, not just passing, but dominating. The bond with Elias Thorne wasn't immediate. It was forged in steel and repetition. Thorne, still numb from the loss of his wife to cancer 2 years prior, was a man in need of a purpose beyond his own grief. Vandal was a raw instrument of power in need of a master. They found a language together, a silent communication of shifted weight, a quiet word, a look. In a world of chaos, they became each other's anchor. That blue-black coat wasn't just a stunning anomaly. It was a tactical advantage. At night, Vandal was invisible. He was a ghost. He could move through a dark warehouse, a silent shadow, until the only thing a suspect knew was the explosive impact and the inescapable grip. He was the point man for the SWAT team, the first one through the door, the one who faced the gun so that the officers behind him had a chance to see it. The neighbors didn't know the stories. They didn't know about the warehouse raid on the east side, where an armed suspect was hidden in the rafters, aiming his rifle down at the team. The officers were slicing the pie blind. Thorne unclipped Vandal. Hledat seek. Vandal didn't hesitate. He scented the man, found a ladder, and went up it like a cat. The suspect fired. The shot echoed in the steel building. Vandal took the round, a .22 caliber, to his shoulder. But he did not stop. He hit the man, taking him out of the fight, saving Thorne's life, and likely the lives of the entire team. But there was another call, the one that changed him. It wasn't a warehouse. It was a derelict house, a confirmed meth lab, and it was booby-trapped. Thorne and Vandal were part of the entry team. The air was thick with that smell, that acrid, sharp chemical sweetness. Vandal was on high alert, his nose working overtime, telling Thorne something was wrong. But before Thorne could process the warning, a pressure plate was triggered. The explosion was deafening. It was a flash of white-hot fire. Vandal was thrown slamming into a wall. Thorne was knocked down, his leg pinned by a burning beam, the air sucked from his lungs. The room was an inferno. Vandal, his shoulder shredded by shrapnel, his fur singed, scrambled to his feet. He found Thorne in the smoke. He bit down on the back of Thorne's heavy vest and pulled. He dragged his 200-pound partner inch by agonizing inch backward out of the collapsing, burning room, just as the ceiling caved in. Vandal recovered. He was cleared for duty after 3 surgeries. He received the Detroit PD's Medal of Valor. But the trauma, it stayed. The scent was logged, seared into his brain. It was a permanent, non-negotiable trigger. That specific acrid sweet smell was no longer just a chemical. It was a prophecy. It meant fire. It meant pain. It meant Elias was in danger. It was a switch that, when flipped, bypassed all training and activated a single primal directive. Sound the alarm. Neutralize the threat. Protect Elias. Sergeant Mike Rourke, the head trainer for the DPD K9 unit, a man who had seen hundreds of dogs, would later explain it. We train them for gunfire, for explosions, for knives. We can't train out memory. We can't train them for PTSD. Not really. That dog, Vandal, that scent is a doorway straight back to that fire. He's not being aggressive toward that neighbor. He's warning him. He's warning all of them. In his mind, that garage is about to explode. He's a smoke detector with teeth. Elias Thorne knew all of this, of course. He was there in the fire. He had the scars on his leg to prove it. He knew Vandal had saved him. But he never made the connection. Why would he? Mr. Henderson was a fussy retired engineer, not a meth cook. The smell from his garage was faint, a harmless hobby. Thorne, blinded by the stress of the HOA and his own grief, saw Vandal's reaction as a behavioral problem, not as a warning. He just saw his partner becoming on edge since the fire. The irony was crushing. The community Vandal served, the one he was permanently scarred from protecting, was now signing a petition to have him exiled. The very trauma he endured to save officers' lives was now being used as evidence of his instability. The petition was on Thorne's kitchen counter, a ticking clock. He had until Monday to respond. He was already looking at real estate listings in another county. It was a Friday evening just after dusk. The late fall air in Detroit was cold, sharp, carrying the smell of burning wood from distant fireplaces. Thorne was off duty inside with Lily trying to help her with a math problem. The atmosphere was heavy. Vandal was off duty too, lying by the back door, a massive silent shadow. He hadn't been in the backyard for a week. Thorne was taking him on 200 a.m. walks to avoid the neighbors. Across the fence, Mr. Henderson was in his garage. He was frustrated. He was trying to clean a complex carburetor, and his usual solvent mix wasn't working. He was experimenting, mixing chemicals from unlabeled jars, trying to recreate a formula he'd used decades ago at the plant. The air was thick with fumes. Inside Thorne's house, Vandal stood up. It started with a whine so low, it was barely audible. The smell. It was coming through the closed door under the seals. It was stronger than ever. He went to the back door, his claws ticking on the hardwood. He scratched a single deep gouge in the wood. Vandal, no Thorne, set his voice tight with stress. Settle. He's just in his garage. Leave it. In the garage, Henderson was impatient. He poured one clear liquid into another. The reaction was not what he expected. It fizzed, and then it flashed. A rag, soaked in the solvent, left too close to a frayed extension cord for an old space heater, sparked. A whoosh of blue flame erupted. It ignited the vapors in the air. The old dry wood of the garage, soaked in 20 years of oil and grease, went up like a tinderbox. Henderson was knocked backward, his synthetic fleece jacket melting his legs on fire. He screamed. Vandal heard the scream. He smelled the smoke, now mixed with the trigger. This was it. The lab. The fire. The prophecy fulfilled. His brain was on fire. He did not wait for a command. He launched his 190-pound body, not at the door, but through the glass of the patio slider. The crash was an explosion of its own. He hit the yard, a blue-black streak, and didn't even slow down. He cleared the 6-foot chain-link fence in a single impossible leap. Neighbors heard the crash of glass, the scream, and then the terrifying roar of the dog. They ran to their windows, their worst fears realized. "He's loose. He's loose. He's going to kill him," someone shrieked. A woman down the street, the one who filmed the bite work, fumbled with her phone, dialing 911. "He's mauling Mr. Henderson. Send everyone." Elias Thorne, his heart stopped, sprinted out the shattered door, his service pistol in his hand, screaming, "Vandal! No Vandal, abort!" He thought his career was over. He thought his partner, his friend, was committing an act he could not take back. He rounded the corner of the garage and stopped dead. The garage was an inferno, flames licking 20 feet into the night sky. Mr. Henderson was on the gravel driveway, rolling weakly, slapping at the flames on his legs. Vandal was not attacking him. Vandal had a mouthful of Henderson's thick jacket by the collar, and he was dragging him, dragging the 170-pound man away from the fire, away from the path of the flames, pulling him toward the street, toward safety, just as he had dragged Thorne. Thorne dropped his weapon and ran, grabbing a garden hose from the side of the house. The neighbors, who had been screaming in terror, were now standing on their porches, silent phones recording, but in absolute stunned awe. They watched as Thorne doused the flames on Henderson, and as Vandal, his duty done, stood guard over the man he had just saved. The dog was barking a ferocious, deafening bark, not at Henderson, but at the fire. He was warning everyone, "Get back. Danger." The sirens wailed. The fire department arrived, and then the police. Henderson was alive with second-degree burns on his legs and arms, but alive. He was in shock, wrapped in a blanket, an EMT tending to him. He kept looking at the dog, who was now sitting calmly next to a soot-covered Thorne. He pulled me out. Henderson whispered to the EMT, his voice raspy. "I was on fire. The dog, he saved me." Thorne was kneeling by Vandal, checking him for cut paws, his hands running through the thick blue-black fur. And then he smelled it. Under the smoke, under the smell of burning plastic, that acrid, sweet chemical solvent. It was the exact smell. It hit Thorne like a physical blow. He buried his face in Vandal's neck. "Oh my God," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You knew. You knew. You were trying to tell us. You were trying to tell us all." The next day, there was a gathering on Sycamore Street. It wasn't an HOA meeting. It was just people. They stood on the sidewalk, looking at the charred skeleton of Henderson's garage. Thorne stood on his porch, his arm resting on Vandal's massive head, and he told them. He told them about the meth lab, the explosion, the booby trap, the fire. He told them what Sergeant Rourke had said. He wasn't trying to get to Mr. Henderson. Thorne said, his voice quiet, but carrying in the stillness. He was trying to warn him. He smelled the danger that we couldn't. He has been screaming in the only language he knows, that something was wrong. And I didn't listen. The change was absolute. The petition was quietly, shamefully torn up. The videos on the neighborhood page were deleted. The neighbors, one by one, walked up to Thorne. They didn't just apologize. They touched Vandal's head. They brought bags of premium dog food, expensive steaks, toys for Lily. They saw him now. They didn't see the fangs. They saw the hero. A week later, Mr. Henderson, his arms wrapped in white bandages, knocked on Thorne's door. He didn't just say thank you. He was holding a box. Inside was a brand new top-of-the-line custom-fit Kevlar vest for Vandal. I called your Captain Henderson, stammered, avoiding eye contact, his face red. He told me which one Vandal prefers. It's rated for rifle rounds. For duty. He's not just your partner officer. He's our guardian. The neighborhood didn't just go back to normal. It became something new. A community. They were proud of Vandal. He was their K9. When Elias Thorne pulled the black SWAT cruiser out of the driveway, the neighbors didn't cross the street. They waved. And Vandal, sitting in his armored kennel, would sometimes let out a single soft woof in reply. They finally understood his language. The final perfect image came that summer. A neighborhood barbecue held in Thorne's backyard. Mr. Henderson, his scars faded to pink, was at the grill. And in the center of the yard, K9 Vandal was not in his kennel. He was lying in the grass asleep, bathed in the afternoon sun. And Lily Thorne's daughter was asleep too, her head resting on the 190-pound weapon, her small hand tangled in his blue-black fur. His off switch was never a button. It was just a context. He was a guardian. And now, finally, he was home. We are so quick to judge the guardians. We live in a world of surfaces, and we mistake the growl of warning for the snarl of aggression. We see the fang, the shadow, the power, and we assume the intent is malice, not protection. Vandal's story is a profound, burning reminder that the most ferocious loyalty often wears the most frightening mask. It's a reminder that our own fear is often the only thing blinding us to the truth. The heroes among us are rarely the ones we expect. They don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear fur. Sometimes they are the shadows who fight battles we can't see, triggered by demons we can't smell, all to protect a world that, until the fire comes, doesn't even know it needs saving.